All right. Now the one bad part about our setup, guys, is we have one mic with one cord. Because
we like each other.
that's good. Let's keep it clean. No hitting below the belt. Anyway, do what you guys do. But I'll just real quick, Roger Valdez, right here in the front, he's just of the piece, trustworthy, so he's going to be our timer. He has a card to hold up for 30 seconds on left, and it says 30 on it, and then he has one that says stop. So, candidates will each have 2 minutes at the beginning to introduce yourselves, talk about yourselves. Then I have the questions from the audience. The only screening that's been done of the questions is for repetitive questions. The questions will be drawn at random. We'll go down the line. Since there's only 2 of you, it'll be great and easy. And you each have 2 minutes to answer a question. At the end of each round, you'll each have 1 minute rebuttal, if you would like it. And then at the end of the forum, 2 minutes for closing statements. So with that, we'll get started. Adam Kwasman.
Thank you for coming here this evening and sharing it with us. I'm Adam Kwasman, and I was ranked by Americans for Prosperity as the most conservative member of the Arizona legislature last year. I proudly represent you in Legislative District 11. As your Vice Chairman of the Arizona House Ways and Means Committee, I also serve on the Appropriations and Commerce Committees. I hold a master's degree in economics from George Mason University. If you know who Rush Limbaugh is, you know who Walter Williams is, who subs in for Rush Limbaugh. Walter Williams taught me economics. I work in the private sector as an economist. This is what I do. Because right now, we don't have time to be sending mealy-mouthed Republicans to Washington, D.C. We better start sending fighters, conservative fighters, or else we're finished. We don't have any more time. We have to stop spending. We have to repeal Obamacare with everything we've got. Because we know that Barack Obama has a phone and a pen and he's not afraid to use it. You've seen what he's done in Nevada. You've seen what he's done with his executive orders. My record is one of fighting against not only the Democrats and liberals, but also big government Republicans. We have to make sure that we stand up for conservative principles. I'm Adam Kwasman. I'm looking forward to answering your questions and getting to know you, and hopefully, we will take this Senate back and we will send real fighters to Washington, D.C. Thank you.
How are y'all this evening? I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to come down and listen to us. My name is Gary Kiehne. I was born in Springerville, Arizona. I've spent a lifetime in the cattle industry, general businesses, small businesses. I'm in the hotel and motel business. I've spent 30 years in the oil and gas business, exploring for and developing oil and gas wells. So I got to tell you, I've created a few jobs in our district. I own some businesses in our district, and I understand the basic mechanics of our district. I understand how federal lands relate to our district, because I've spent my lifetime punching cows on federal lands. I understand how federal lands issues are changing and how they're totally making our district non-productive in our areas where I live. So I got to tell you, it's a pleasure to run for a seat like this. This seat doesn't belong to some career politician. It's the people's seat. It's your seat. It's for you to determine who you want to send to Washington and represent you. And I'd be honored to do so. I think we need to look for some accountability in Washington, which we won't see. There's no accountability. When you have an administration that does not abide by your Constitution, you're in deep trouble. So I want to thank you for your time. I look forward to talking with you tonight. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you guys very much. So now we'll start with the questions. First question to Adam, second one to Gary, 1 minute, 2 minutes to answer that, 1 minute rebuttal at the end of the round, randomly drawn. First question. What are your opinions on gun control?
Using both hands and hitting the target that you're aiming for. I'm a proud life member of the NRA. I'm a proud hunter, but I know that our Second Amendment rights are not about hunting. Our Second Amendment rights are natural and from God Almighty. And we see what this administration has been doing to our Second Amendment rights. And when Ann Kirkpatrick said that all options are on the table, when it came to gun control, a shiver went down my spine, and I know a shiver should have gone down yours, right? We need to send fighters to Washington, D.C. who will stand up against those who want to take away our God-given natural rights. I have a perfect NRA record, a perfect record in the Arizona legislature. We need to send proven conservatives to Washington to stand up for those rights that mean the most to us.
By permission, is it, oh, I'm sorry.
New question. You can rebut that at the end of the
No, we're good.
How is it possible to get our republic back on track, i.e. eliminating excess bureaucrats?
Well, first off, you gotta start right here with this seat. You gotta get one out. And you gotta do it one at a time. But what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to figure out how to put America back to work. And in rural America, in order to do that, we've got to arrange for financing. One of the biggest problems we have in this country is an inability for a young entrepreneur to acquire financing no matter how good of an idea he has. I challenge you to go to the local banks, which don't exist anymore, and try to get yourself a loan as a young entrepreneur. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to get government control out of our business so we can go back to work and put America back to work. Thank you.
1 minute? Anybody want a minute?
I'll take it. Do we have unlimited amount of rebuttals just to have a conversation? Is that
Yeah.
excellent? So when we ask the question about how we're going to stop these bureaucracies, we have to look at think of this as, so I apologize for being a wonky economist, but we look at a balance book, right? And job creation by limiting government is a very important part of it. That's the growth side. But what we need to focus on, everybody believes in growth. What we need to focus on and be brave about is where we're going to reduce and reform on the other side. We cannot be just growing our economy without subsequently reducing the size of government. Full bureaucracies have got to be eliminated. We need to limit the EP. We need to get rid of the EPA. We need to get rid of the Federal Reserve. We need to make sure that those bureaucracies that can belong to the states are sent down to the states because we believe in federalism. We need to start looking at full departments in order to save this economy and put our country back into our constitutional appropriate principles. That's what being a fighter is all about.
Gary gets a minute.
Well, thank you. You know, I agree. You've got to get rid of a lot of the government control because we're the most overregulated society in the world. We were at a conference the other day in Midland, Texas, where the major producers of oil and gas got up and presented their budget for the year. Their two main problems were the EPA, and on federal lands, it was the bald-headed guy at the BLM office in Carlsbad, New Mexico. And all he was doing was putting up obstacles. So that's an example of every part of government. You don't see one bit of it that's run that doesn't have a ton of waste in it. So that's what we got to cut, is a ton of the waste. Thank you.
Next round, Gary's question first. What is the absolutely most important issue facing us today, and what is your position on this issue?
Well, I think the bottom line is you have got to put people in office that are going to honor your federal constitution. It's unbelievable the position we've got ourselves in. The second thing, and most important, is I think you gotta send people to Washington who actually have a little dirt under their fingernails and have worked for a living. Because we continue to send career politician after career politician up there, and all they've done is figure out how to run us $17 trillion in debt. If they can't balance their own checkbook and they couldn't succeed in the private sector in business, we've got no business letting them run our government. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't answer that one.
You get your rebuttal.
Oh, I get the rebuttal.
Usually we have more than 2 people, so it's all right. What are your views on parental rights and rights of a child?
Great question. So I want to talk first about why we need to stop career politicians. And the first thing we need to do is we need to support term limit legislation to put it in the Constitution. I proudly am a signatory of a pledge to make sure that we have term limits. And I put a term limit amendment and put it to the people and make sure that we don't have these career politicians who are in office year after year on end, because they do lose sight of where they come from. Parental rights and children rights. Important issue, state issue. Does not fall under the purview of Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution. Those powers not given to the Congress under this Constitution are hereby reserved for the states and the people respectively. Honoring our 10th Amendment means acknowledging that there are important issues there. We want to make sure that that parents and children have the type of appropriate relationships where one parent can't go out of town, can't leave town immediately without notifying the other parent under a judicial ruling. We need to make sure that our children are not allowed to run roughshod by liberal policies who want to take over, where the parents want to protect their children based on their culture and their faith. That said, that's why we have states. We have to honor our federalist system and protect our 10th Amendment at all costs, even on issues that we find tremendously important.
Benedict's rebuttal?
Well, I can tell you that I believe the most important part that's being left out of parental care is discipline. And it goes all the way through the school systems. When they took discipline out of the school systems, I got to tell you, when I was in first grade, I got whipped about every 3 or 4 days. And it did not warp my personality, I can assure you. It was an attitude adjustment, and we all learned a lot better when we were disciplined. I'm not saying beat them, but I'm saying get their attention. Anytime you have a student who is allowed to talk back to a school teacher and not backed up by the parents, the teacher's not backed up by the parents, we're in trouble, and that's what we are today. Thank you.
Or the principal.
You good? All right. Next question. How does your personal business experience make you the candidate for the average Joe to vote for?
That's a great question. So, I worked at the Cato Institute in their Center for Constitutional Studies. We fought for limited government and maximum amount of personal freedom and free markets. I then founded my own economic consulting firm, 2510 Consulting. Why 2510? It's from Leviticus 25:10. Proclaim liberty throughout the ends of the earth unto all its inhabitants. I work in a financial advisory firm as their in-house economist. So what we do is make sure that our clients are not big businesses. Our clients are teachers. People who want to save for their retirement. People who lost their money in the stock market and want to make sure that something is there. People are so scared right now. People are so scared, and they should be, because the government is breathing down your neck left and right. The principles of saving for our future are the same principles that we need to bring to the United States Congress. We cannot, just as I would never recommend an individual maxing out their credit card and taking out another credit card to pay out this credit card, as we put individuals on the long-term path to prosperity, we've got to put this country on the long-term path to prosperity. When we're coaches, when we're the coaches in the firm, in the private sector, with individuals, plumber. One of the first people we spoke with was a plumber who just had his first child and wanted to start saving for college that first day. I applaud that. That's what we need to start thinking in the long run, in the United States Congress.
Right, Gary?
Well, I think I'm pretty unique as a candidate.
Wait, your question.
Well, I thought I could do a rebuttal.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I thought I could take a rebuttal.
Go ahead, do it. I'll change it.
Whatever you want, boss. You're ready to start. It's your dance.
Changing the rules in the.
Well, excuse me,
I think basically I'm a pretty unique candidate in that I have had a lifetime experience in the private sector. I've dealt with federal lands issues my whole life. I've spent 30 years in the oil and gas business exploring for oil and gas. And in this district, I don't know if you know it or not, but we have a brand new discovered CO2 field in the northeast corner of the state, directly related to oil and gas. It's used in tertiary recovery. Another thing is I'm in a small businessman. I sell sleep at night. We've got 3 hotels. So I do understand what tourism is to our district. And I want you to know that I'm probably the only guy that knows how to build a piece of fence and knows which end of the cow gets up first that's running for Congress here. So I gotta let you know that that's what makes America work, is the experience that you have when you go to these offices. We've spent too many inexperienced people up there. Thank you.
Yes, all right. Question, and you can rebut, and we'll go that way, since there's only 2 of us. That was your question, he rebutted, so now his question, then you get your rebuttal.
I thought that's what we were doing all
That'll
along.
be better. That'll be better with 2 candidates, I apologize. Is that good with everyone? Sound good? Yeah. Keep it flowing.
If you ask too difficult one, we're gonna change it.
All right. No more change. Do you agree with the releasing of the Mexican gray wolf? If so, why? If not, please explain why.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm the only guy running again that's actually lost cattle to the Mexican gray wolf that's sitting here at this table. You know, it's a crying shame when the federal government turns wolves out on landowners and ranchers that our grandparents, my grandparents and great-grandparents fought endlessly to get rid of them. And the funny part is they tell you they're going to pay for your livestock when you lose them, but they don't. They find every excuse not to. And I challenge any one of you to go up in the northern part of the state in the thick brush and find a cow that's actually been killed the day she's been killed, because that's the only way you're going to prove it. So what you have, the wolf deal, I liken it to if you were to turn the 2-legged wolves out of the prison system here in downtown Phoenix. You'd have the same scenario. It's a bunch of bulls to turn wolves loose on whatever society there is, whether it's the cattleman and the rancher or people themselves. And you know, the school kids in the small town that I grew up in have to sit in a cage to catch the school bus. They have erected cages for those students to sit in. My next door neighbor called me last month. He lost 8 full-grown cows to wolves. He got paid for 6 of them. He got paid $1,200 a piece, and the market value of those cows are $2,200 a piece. So something's wrong somewhere. Constitutes a taking. And you notice they're not turning the wolves loose down here in Phoenix, Tucson, metropolitan areas. They're turning them loose on us up there. And we're the ones suffering. Thank you.
This is a great example of the difference between the 2 candidates here who both agree but have a different background. It does constitute a taking, but here's the difference between having the experience in the legislature. Today I voted that if there is a wolf who's done that taking, you can shoot it. That's what I voted for today. That's the difference between having that experience in the legislature and taking these problems and bringing solutions, real solutions to the table to help people's lives. It's that type of experience, that conservative experience, being able to navigate and fight for these principles, making sure that we protect our rural communities as much as humanly possible. Not one of the Democrats actually today mentioned, well, if it's just the takings, let's just pay them just compensation. That's not good enough for me. When they've threatened your children, we take action. That's the experience that I bring to the table.
Will I get another?
Well,
Now you know how I feel based on the last one, huh?
Okay, so Adam's question, Gary's rebuttal.
I'm stipulating a rule of a gentlemanly rebuttal for both of us in this one.
Go ahead. Go ahead. You sure you don't want
It's
to?
your question.
I was going to let you rebut.
This is my rule.
All right.
Your question.
We tried.
You try. IRS targeting conservatives. What will you do? What can be done?
Abolish the IRS. That's not a pipe dream, ladies and gentlemen. They're targeting you. They're targeting you for being members of the Tea Party. They're targeting you for donating to Republican candidates. They're targeting you for who you are. It is the scariest situation possible. I wrote the bill last year to abolish the income tax in Arizona. What did one of my primary opponents, who happens to not be here today, do? It didn't even get a committee hearing. Didn't even get a committee hearing. Imagine how Arizona would be without an income tax. How much business we could bring in. That's the difference between having conservatives versus just other Republicans. We should be able to abolish the IRS. A low, flat tax that increases growth and limits government need not have an IRS that's targeting you. Oh, and Lois Lerner? Lois Lerner. She's going to jail when I'm up there. She's going to jail. We are going to hold these people accountable. That's what we need. We need to send fighters to Washington, D.C., who are not afraid, who are not mealy-mouthed, but who go up there with proven experience, who have written the bills, and have fought for your liberties. And that is why I'm running for Congress.
Well, I got to tell you about the IRS. Yesterday I was in Catalina, and I went in to send in my payment to the IRS this year. And we're all out trying to get signatures, as you can see here tonight. And there were a bunch of people standing in line putting a certified return receipt deal on their envelope. So I went out to my car and I got a stack of brochures. I got the signature pages, the petition, she brought it in. I got 70 petitions signed, 70 signatures within an hour and a half. You think the American people aren't motivated to do something about the IRS? They are fed up, and we all are. And that should be number one priority. Number one priority is getting rid of every government controlling agency that keeps us oppressed. Thank you.
Quick rebuttal? No. Okay. That was the rebuttal.
That was the rebuttal to your question.
Got it.
Now it's his question, your rebuttal.
It's confusing.
Do we need, you want me to go over it again? No, we're
I just wanted to turn election day, change tax
Your
day
big time.
to the day before election day. That would be the best thing.
All right, Gary's question. I'm giving you guys some latitude because there's two of us. We're having a good time. Two of you. What is your opinion on federal land? How will you help bring it back to the state's control?
Any doubt about that? The bottom line is, in the western United States, 27% or 50% of our lands in the west are managed by the federal government. That's 606 million acres. 27% in the entire continental United States, if you will, that's virtually non-productive. Because of the Endangered Species Act, the Equal Access to Justice Act, the Environmental Protection Agency, and every other government entity you can name, they've taken us off those federal lands. Today it takes 18 months to get a drilling permit to drill an oil and gas well on federal lands if you're lucky. And you got a president that tells you that he has decreased our reliance on foreign oil, and we're less than 50% reliant on it. I got to tell you, he's full of baloney. He's done everything he can possibly do to keep us from drilling those federal lands. So we've got to put those lands back into production, at the very least, multiple use, like we had in the 70s before these acts were passed. Secondly, they can transfer these lands to the states and let the states manage them, because the states net $6.29 an acre for every acre they manage, and the federal government loses $1.83 on every acre they manage. So who better to manage? Or My primary choice would be to force the federal government to abide by the enabling acts that we executed in states when we came into the Union, and for them to divest of those lands and take that money and use it to pay this debt we owe. Because if you and I go broke, we have to sell something to pay our debts, not continue to print money. Thank you.
Good idea.
Rebuttal.
I'm just glad Gary touched upon Enabling Act reform. We talked about that today in the legislature, and frankly, the Enabling Act is mostly a state issue. If you think about it, Arizona has actually reformed their Enabling Act before. We need to make sure what happened in Nevada doesn't happen in the state of Arizona. There are leaders, conservative leaders in the Arizona legislature. See, I'm a big 10th Amendment guy. I believe in state solutions where we have state solutions because, frankly, I don't trust these feds one bit. We need to make sure there's only a few fighters in Washington, and until Barack Obama is booted from office, or he's going to have to leave, and we make sure that Hillary Clinton never gets there, and we send conservatives to Washington, we have to fend for ourselves. And as the federal government falls, Arizona must stand up. People like Brenda Barton, who's endorsed this campaign, who's endorsed me for United States Congress, is leading the way. She represents the Flagstaff and Sedona areas. She's leading the way in Enabling Act reform at the state level. It has to come from the states, and then the feds will listen once we scream loud enough. Thank you.
Adam, your question? I already know the answer, but I'll go ahead with it. What is your position on term limits?
I have signed the term limit pledge. I have signed the pledge publicly. I don't know if I'm the only one. Am I the only one? Did you sign the pledge? Okay, just sign the pledge. We gotta sign the pledge. We need term limits. We need term limits now. Matt Salmon has the bill to put in the Constitution 3 terms for the House, max. Couple terms in the Senate, max. I'm iffy even on that one, but it's better than nothing. When we have people in power, it doesn't matter what pin they have, whether it's an R or a D, they will be corrupted. I believe in term limit legislation. I believe in going there and fighting and moving on. It's like Gary said, this is not our seat that we're running for. It's your seat. It's for the people. We fight for your liberties for a time, and then we walk away. That's what's important. Thank you.
Well, I guarantee you, I'll probably be term limited out because at my age, I don't plan to stay there that long.
No, don't say
I'm
that.
not going to be there until I'm 80 years old. I'm going to be there about 3 terms, and that's about it. Now, I want to address something about what's happening in Nevada versus it's saying it's not going to happen here in Arizona. I got to tell you, it already has happened. The Martinez family in Greene County, Arizona, were kicked off their ranch, very similar to the people in Nevada are going through right now, just a few years ago. So if you think it's not going to happen in Arizona, it already has. So come to the realization that it's real. And the sad thing is every district ranger on the United States Forest Service has his own little militia. He's got his own little group of lawmakers, and they do exactly what he tells them to do. Thank you.
Gary, your random question. Are your plans to be a career politician?
No, I don't believe so. I think I already answered that. I'll pass the mic. Thank
All
you.
right.
No.
Okay. I just have a randomly drawn question. Adam, your question. With a strong advocacy for separation of church and state, should social issues be dropped from platforms?
Absolutely not. We believe in the right to life. We absolutely, all right, here's the deal. Reagan said, raise a banner of bold colors, not pale pastels. We need conservatives, and that means being socially conservative with being fiscally conservative. Understanding the principles and conserving the founders' principles that made this nation great. under God. I'm not afraid of any issue. When you have that true belief in your heart, pro-life, pro-family, and you have that proven record of being pro-life and pro-family, I'm not going to step away from it now. And I'm not going to be bullied. I'm not going to be bullied by some leftist on MSNBC that nobody watches. You know what? Forget Fox News. Put me on MSNBC. I want to go talk to Chris Matthews. Tell him it says to throw up my leg to go talk to him. And we'll talk about protecting these American values. We should never, ever be bullied into moving away from the principles that we hold dear. I'm 100% pro-life. I put it on my material. I'm 100% pro-family. That's what we need in Washington, D.C.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm probably the last generation that said the Pledge of Allegiance at our high school basketball games. The last generation that said the prayer before our basketball games. And I can tell you that it's been a remarkable difference, just in my lifetime, what I've observed. You know, we would go to a high school game and everybody would stand up and they'd say the Pledge of Allegiance. They'd say a prayer. They'd introduce the starting five. But I can remember exactly what happened. There was one lady who raised enough heck with the school board that the rest of us didn't get to do that anymore. And I'm tired of listening to the single persons jumping up and getting their way. If they don't believe in the way the rest of us believe, they need to just step outside and let us say the Pledge of Allegiance, let us say our prayer. But quit interfering with us. Thank you.
Gary, your question? Somewhere I read, render to Caesar what is Caesar's. Do you support or oppose the Bundy family ranch?
Well, you know, the Bundy family is what's going on up there is just an indication of what I just spoke of a minute ago. You have a BLM officer or director who has his private militia. And it's a crying shame that he doesn't use the court system, that he's taken it upon themselves to come in there and threaten these people with their lives. It's amazing that they would come in there and try to gather cattle in 90+ degree weather with a helicopter and run 150 of them to death. Where's PETA? Looking out for these poor cattle. Is it the cattle's fault that the BLM, the rancher across west? The cattle are the victim. I'm not sure what the stance is with regard to the rancher's involvement with the BLM. Can you believe the liberal media and the reports they're telling you? I think not. So I just got to tell you that what really disturbs me is the cold hard facts that they're arming to move this man out and point rifles at him and his family. And I can guarantee you that it's ridiculous for them to do that. There are other means in which to gather these cattle. And I don't know who the guys are gathering the cattle, but they obviously aren't cowboys. Because I don't think they could gather my milk cow. Thank you.
I know the stance of him on public land. We don't render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. It's not the feds. Public means it's ours. This man's been ranching that land long before the feds ever had any claim to it. This is absolutely absurd what they're doing. And you see what the power of the people can do when they rise up. And I don't care about a court case. I don't care about a sniper. We stood and we told the federal government, not anymore. No longer, you're not going to do it. You're not going to try and use an excuse to protect a little turtle and destroy our property rights. You are not going to overpower us. We stand up, and that's what's happening all across this country. Finally, people are waking up. Members of the legislature went up there, and they stood shoulder to shoulder with sniper rifles facing them. I'm so proud of all of them over there, including Paul Gosar. That's what we need. We need fighters to stand up against this out-of-control administration.
Adam, your question? on getting our land back from the federal government, what do you feel would need to be done? So now, what's your plan of action?
So, we talked about the Enabling Act at the state level. We have to make sure that we reform our Enabling Act at the state level. We have, well, unfortunately, by the way, I am supporting Justin Pierce for Secretary of State, although it's a very sad thing to see him leave the legislature because he is a conservative hero. But it's people like Justin, people like Brenda Barton, people like Steve Smith, people like Frank Pratt and TJ Shope who understand that we need major Enabling Act reform in the state of Arizona. Once we get that, once we get our reforms, it has to be a constitutional amendment, needs a 2/3 vote of the populace, but don't we think after what happened at the Bundy Ranch, we're gonna be able to get that passed pretty easily. People know what's happening in Arizona. We pass the reforms at the state, and I'll be the first one ready to work with you at the federal level, along with Paul Gosar, David Schweiker, Matt Salmon, Trent Franks, and we'll get it passed. It has to be approved at the federal level. See, all the pieces are in place. The founders were brilliant the way they did it. All the pieces are in place for us to take back our lands and take back our Constitution. It's going to have to start from the states, and we've got to send the right fighters to Washington.
Well, each state, as they came into the union, as part of their application process, they presented a state constitution. And they executed an Enabling Act. And the Enabling Act provided that they would convey all unsettled lands to the federal government to be held in trust. And the federal government was to divest of those lands. 95% of the proceeds for the sale of those lands was to go to pay for our national debt as a result of our war for independence. 5% of the money went to set up the schools and the infrastructure. So if you're looking for a means to get there, it already exists. We just got to get it done. We've got to tackle the task at hand and force the federal government to honor those enabling acts. Thank you.
Gary, your question? Opinion on the cattle battle. Will it, can it happen in Arizona?
Well, it already has, as I said.